fresh off the plane from Isla.
You are fresh off the plane from Isla. Where did you go?
Just so everyone knows, I literally said, Andy, I want to talk about my trip to Isla. I'm so excited. They need to calm down. So not a dram from this evening's box, or I think this month's box, but went over to see Bunnahabhain when the last pour and sip last video was on. So yeah, I missed you all so much, and yeah, it was such a shame that I couldn't join, but it was really great to see you.
I kept on getting comments like, where the hell is Christy? Where is Christy? I'm like, I'm just trying my best here. She's in Isla.
His best. And I'm sporting a Laphroaig hat. Hopefully everyone has their free hats. I want to see lots of selfies of Laphroaig hats on the social media channels.
I think we also got a, unless it was just me, we got the, was it Talisker mug?
Yes, there's a mug. Although I did say I had a moment where I was like, is Talisker on Island? No, it is not. It is on Skye. But I will save that mug for next time we have a Skye-themed box, and we will run with it.
With all 2 distilleries.
With all 2 distilleries, yes. But it's good. What have you been drinking, though, Andy? I've obviously been on Isla, which I will not shut up about. What's been on your radar?
I just had a pre-dram of this was sent to me, the Royal Salutes 32-year-old. That was for the Queen's Jubilee. And it is very, very nice. Yeah, really nice. Highly recommend it. Get it. And it's gone. Yeah.
I was going to say, I'll get it. It's probably out of my standard price range.
It's definitely out of my standard price range as well. I didn't realise, I don't think they bottle anything under 20 years old, which I thought was a mad thing that they don't really shout loud enough about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely not in my price range. But if it is in anyone's price range, highly recommend it.
Yes. Amazing. So this evening, as mentioned, we are I've just seen a comment from Pat Cowley. Nice hat, thank you. Is it rude to drink out of a tin mug? I don't think so. I think they're great for cocktails.
No, you've got to make yourself a hot toddy in that. Though it's not the season, but
it's not the season for the hat either. I might have to take it off and get very warm. And I have hat hair, but there we go. You just have to
That's fine.
We can do it.
Coleman Williams is saying the hat fits you better than it does him. So, sorry about that.
It stretches.
It stretches, exactly. It's a one size fits all. Your Uncle Vanya's very happy with the theme of this box. He couldn't book those this year, so feel like that's very appropriate of Pour and Sip. Could have gone for festival exclusives, but maybe they'll do it next month.
Oh my God, I will love it. If one year we can do a box of festival exclusives, it would be incredible.
You would have tried the Boonaharbin festival exclusives, right?
Yes. So there's not just one, there's not just 2, there's 3. And I can't remember all the details off my head, but there was two of the 3 that I thought were incredible. One of them was their Monya distillery exclusive on the island. Can I just say all of them were incredible? And that was amazing. It was, it was a Tokai cask. So like an ex-sweet wine cask with the smoke. It was almost like ethereal with the smoke and the sweetness. I loved it. And I've said that there was 3. There may be a sneaky extra one still under embargo that I also really loved, but I can't say any more for now. But it was such a treat to get to taste them. Honestly, it was amazing.
NDA. Gareth Peters, yeah, we have been asking for an Isla one for a while, so glad we got these. We did have an Isla one last year, so I don't know how long you've been with us, Gareth. Didn't we? Unless I'm
think, yeah, so May. So just a bit of context, if anyone hasn't read their sheets yet, don't forget you've got your tasting notes right here. And the first one, not only does it have the live tasting dates, which are very, very useful, 5th and the 19th of May, it also gives you a little bit of blurb about the box this month. So this month is our Isla box. So every year in May, we'll absolutely talk to our guests about this for sure. It's the Isla Festival, and every distillery has a distillery day. It's incredible. I'm not entirely sure what Master of Malt plans are. I know Jake, our wonderful colleague, is sending us your comments so he can send us a little brief. But been very lucky in previous years to go over with Master of Malt and go to each of the distillery days. If you ever can get over to the island for it, I highly, highly recommend. It is a whiskey bucket list trip. You'll get to taste incredible whiskies, meet awesome people, dance even, have a whole load of fun. It's amazing. And that's our little ode to the Isla Festival, is this box right here.
It is. We definitely did this last year.
Yeah, we did for sure.
So, we carry on with these themes, don't we, every year?
We love a theme. We love a theme.
We love a theme here. Real Boingo. Good evening from Edinburgh. Isla Bonanza this month. Yay. Green tea is green. Hi, all sat here in my Laphroaig beanie waiting to go. See it? Put it back on, Christy.
I'll see if I can cope for a bit longer.
Mine's in the car. I might go and get it when Christy's doing her. Gareth Peters, nice little mug for a hot toddy. Exactly. So if you are coming down with a cold or something like that, that's a perfect mug to make yourself a hot toddy with some Talisker or Laphroaig. Your Uncle Vanya, Royal Salute, Love Heart, absolutely. Jonathan B, evening, or Reverend Kevin Wright. I just arrived, looking forward to this. One size fits some, but not all. Yes, that is true. Very sorry about those with heads either too big or too small for our hats. Mike Pizarro took the Boonhaven Cart Strength, Jura Lock and Old Perth with me on holiday. It's been fun. Are you still on holiday, Mike? With those 3 drams? Those are some really nice drams to be on holiday with. Panda Bear, Isla Festival, loving the hats. Pat Cowling, how many bottles do you have on your shelf? Is my 18 average, low, or greedy?
That's a very good shout. I want to know everyone's bottle counts currently. That can be our question for the day. I haven't actually counted.
This isn't my only shelf. Just guys, this is not it. It's just the space for that part of the shelf. I don't know, maybe 120 in the house, maybe something along those lines. Which is way greedier. So very sorry, Pat Cowling, really, really greedy. Please let us know how many you've got in your house, and that's a good thing to talk about. Jeff Whiskey, good evening all. Fantastic box this month. The last Isla box shown me my whiskey of the year 2021. What was that, Jeff? Let us know. Steve Coleman Williams, we had a Laphroaig sherry cask last year for sure. We did. And oh, here we go. All the numbers coming in now. Steve Coleman Williams is at 32. Ali C last count was 82. So yeah,
pretty good going. So tonight, let's talk about this evening. We've talked about the Isla Festival. I still want to see your bottle counts. I still want to see your selfies of you and your hats. So post those on the Pour and Sip Club Instagram and Twitter and wherever you're following us along. We have one guaranteed guest tonight. She's waiting in the wings, and she's going to have a chat with Andy first up. So that's for Bruichladdich. And then we're hoping to have a second guest to chat through Bowmore and Laphroaig, but we're lying in wait. There may be connectivity issues, so that may be a surprise, or you may have Andy and myself talking to you about Bowmore and Laphroaig. So that's the 3 drams for this evening. Ready your tasting glasses. Bruichladdich first, followed by Bowmore, followed by Laphroaig. And we want all of your questions, all of your comments, all of your tasting notes. We want to hear from you. What do you think about this? We want it all. We're greedy. Forget about the bottle counts. We're greedy for your comments and your questions, particularly for our guest.
We want it all. Just a few more of your numbers, because that is all appearing on the screen now. Like I've just asked, what's your favourite dram of the evening? DH, 13 opens, 27 cube. Jester, 82. Chris Dagnan, low, has drank them all to heal my new hip in. So 4. Amazing. Sorry about that. Joe F, 48. Barry Cullen, 15. Colin Barker, evening or missed last month's Porn Sip, but was delighted to see an Isla box this month. Gareth Peters, 12 unopened, 2 open. That's it. It's sometimes all about quality over quantity for sure. Wow, your Uncle Vanya putting me to shame. 260 to 270. Barely any left unopened. Most of them... Wow. That's what we like to see, all opened. Wow, that's a lot of whiskey to get through. Anthony Mullins, but good for you. Anthony Mullins, only 12. I'm quite new to this, but time to grow. Yeah, I'm sorry, Anthony, but you're probably going to get the bug at some point, and that will increase. Colin Barker, 28. We've really opened up the can.
Yeah, we're over egging the pudding here. Time is of the essence, but I do like a question from Anthony Mullins, and this is a good one to chat amongst yourselves. You might come back to this at the end. What does everyone do with their little pour and sip bottles? That is a good question. So while you are considering that, I'm going to zip in our first guest. First, potentially only, but we're going to say first. We're going to be optimistic. Here is Abby from Bruichladdich. Hey, Abby, how are you doing?
Hello, just zipping in nicely. Also, I just ran while I was off screen and got my Port Charlotte scarf.
Yes.
Oh,
since
nice.
Everybody else is from this. It's really nice, actually. It's beautiful. It's from the Tartan Blanket Company, and I got it as a Christmas present.
What's going on? It's summer here. Christy's in a hat. You're now in a scarf.
Okay, so the only reason I was doing it, obviously, was to show off, because everyone else has a winter wear. But also, I'm in Scotland, so it is it's technically summer, but it's still the west coast of Scotland. So yeah, I am usually based in London, but I just came back as well from a trip to Islay. I was there for a wedding. This is going to put me off. Yeah, I do love a prop if I'm like at a festival or something, but this is different. But yeah, so I just got back from my first trip to Islay since 2019, because of the pandemic, because just like responsibility. I went from going over like every couple of weeks to never. So yeah, it's exciting. Went over for my friend Kelsey's wedding, which was an even nicer occasion to go over with. Not that I don't love hosting people on the island, but going to a Cayley is more fun.
Definitely.
Sometimes.
I do love a Kaylee. On that note, I'm going to leave you in Andy's capable hands. My dram is ready. I can't wait to hear all about it. 2009 The Organic. Take it away, Abby and Andy.
So, Abby, talk to us a bit about like your role currently for Bruichladdich and how you got there.
Of course. So I have worked for Bruichladdich. We never really know. Me and my friend Christy started at the same time. I think it's almost 8 years. She thinks it's 7, but it's a number of years, over 7 years for the distillery. My background was hospitality, so cocktail bartending, majoritatively in Scotland. I used to also be involved in music quite a bit more than drinks. And then the club that I worked for opened a bar. And so I had to learn how to make cocktails really quickly, and sort of honestly, and so I had to sort of go from only drinking 2-liter bottles of Strongbow to learning how to make cocktails, and was just kind of weirdly quite good at it. And so that's like where my background was. I would have continued in music probably more, but I just fell in love with booze in general. I love spirits. I love wine. I love sherry, especially, and especially I love things with a sense of place. And so weirdly, even and I think when I was younger, I think when you're younger and you're making cocktails, you're making things, you're kind of always thinking about the other, like where else can I find flavor from? Like, can I find flavor from other countries? Things that seem more exciting, maybe.
Yeah.
But then actually, when you think about Scotland or you think about wherever you're from, like what you have around you is just, if not more exciting, because so that's why I fell in love with Bruichladdich. So I even remember the first time I tried a Bruichladdich was in a bar in Aberdeen called 99, which is still there. And I used to run the little what was techno music club then, but it's not anymore. Yeah, I know. And the Botanist had just came out, so it was 2010. And I remember going up and saying, someone had told me about the Botanist Gin, which we also make at Bruichladdich still, talking about the 22 botanicals handpicked on the island, talking about the sort of fact that we really focus on terroir, raw ingredient, where our stuff comes from, making it as Islay-centric as possible. And I remember being like, I love the sound of that. Let me try their whiskey. And also, how the hell do you pronounce it? And and then serendipitously, whatever it was, like 5-6 years later, somebody actually asked me to apply for the job for the distillery, and so I have ever since.
And here you are 8 years later.
Yeah. Still listening to techno, but drinking whiskey.
It's a weird thing. I meet so many people in the whiskey industry because I'm a musician by trade, but then like do whiskey as well. But it's like there's so many people who have that crossover. I think it's great. I was speaking to Joel, who writes for, I can't remember what it was, and he was a A&R guy for music for Sony, and then kind of got into whiskey, and it's kind of mad how that.
Really?
So maybe there's like a little crossover there. Anyway, talk to us about Bruichladdich, because that's why we're here, and talk to us about the distillery. I mean, it's like, and what kind of happened as well after 1994 when it was kind of shut down and dead essentially, and how it's been revived to where it is today.
Yeah, of course. So the first thing I always start with, I'm sure everybody on here is very up to speed with their drams, with their whiskey, but I just always think it's nice to get everybody up to the same sort of on the same page.
I think it's really good on Pour and Sip as well, because this might be the first Bruichladdich some people are trying on this. So it's nice to know a little bit about the history of the distillery.
Definitely. So the first thing I always start with, like I said, when I first tried the whiskey, I was like, I'd love to know what it tastes like. I love their philosophy, I love their ethos, but how the hell do you pronounce it? So even though you've got it in front of you, this is a classic laddie. It's kind of like our signature, but it's just the easiest way for me to show you the label. Is the pronunciation. Even if I do a tasting, I'll do a tasting, and I'll say, this is how you pronounce it. This is what it means. I'll say it 100 times, and then somebody says, "Well, tell me about Bruichladdich," and I'm like, so it's Bruichladdich. Not Bruichladdich or Bruichladdich, which quite often it's pronounced. People still argue with me about it, and I'm like, I've worked for the distillery for quite some time. It's definitely that. So Bruich in Scots Gaelic means hill, and Clachdich means by the shore or on the beach. So it's anglicised to laddie. So Bruichladdich just means hill by the beach. We are obviously on the island of Islay, as we are in this box. We are on the island of Islay. At the moment on Islay, there's about 9.5 distilleries, kind of bits popping up left, right, and centre. It's a really exciting time to go back and see how things are progressing. Obviously, COVID's put paid to a few things for us, for other distilleries. It's been quite exciting to go back and see things like Mcallen and how that's coming to shape and things. It's an exciting time for the island, I think, in terms of, and interesting actually to see how it will go forward. But on Islay, obviously when people think of Islay, they're thinking of heavily peated, smoky, medicinal, TCP, sort of iodine, seaweed. Yeah, I read a tasting note the other day that said like hospital bandages, which is a very COVID compliant, but that's the vibe. That's what people expect. And Islay's actually, I think, as a region, can be quite polarizing. People will say, I only drink Islay whiskies, or I do not drink Islay whiskies at all. It's quite polarizing if people have maybe had a bad experience, like their dad bought them their first legal drink in Scotland. It's like legal. You start drinking when you're 13, but legally at 18, your dad buys you a really strong Islay and you shot it and it puts you off, and that's quite something that I found with Bruichladdich. Obviously, we have Bruichladdich, we have Port Charlotte, and we have Optimore. So you kind of have one distillery, but three very, very, very different style of ppms inside the range. But one thing at Bruichladdich that we do think things quite differently is Bruichladdich is unpeated. So anything with Bruichladdich on the label is Islay whiskey, but it's 100% 0 ppm, no peat in the production. Then Port Charlotte is 40 ppm, and Optimore is
whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Take your pick.
I was actually asked, I think, can we ask Abby about the story of Optimore? I think there's something we could ask you maybe after we've tried our organic, and we can talk a little bit about Optimore, because it is definitely an exciting range from the Bruichladdich.
Of course.
Obviously, something that, obviously you'll get this question all the time, but something that is really important for Bruichladdich is two things for me which stand out, apart from the awesome bottle designs, but is transparency and terroir.
Yep.
These are kind of two important things that we think about when we think about Bruichladdich, apart from the fact it's unpeated on Islay. And what do those mean to you?
Everything, essentially. So yeah, at Bruichladdich we do things quite differently across the board, like branding probably being the most obvious thing, like you just said, but we focus massively on raw ingredient, what barley we're using, where that barley comes from, what difference that makes to the flavor. If it makes a difference at all, like sometimes that might not make a difference, but we're always open to experimentation, always open to trial, always open to learn something new. Like Bruichladdich, if you go into a meeting, you're like, okay, we're going to come out with some answers here, and you just come out with 100 more releases, 100 more ideas, 100 more ways that things could go. But yeah, transparency is something that we have focused on since we reopened the distillery in 2001. So we reopened as independent in 2001. And it was wine merchants from London that reopened Bruichladdich, and that's really where the idea of terroir came from. So they would see this raw ingredient coming in, saying, oh, it's really interesting. Obviously, when you're talking about wine, your raw ingredients, everything, where it's grown, what it is, what grape it is, what field it's grown in makes a difference. So we say, oh, this barley's coming out amazing. Like, what is it? And it would be like, well, who cares? It's just barley. It's a commodity. And that's the reality. And actually, I saw Adam Hannett doing a taste. Adam's our head distiller. And one time he was doing a tasting and he had his glass up to his nose. Sorry, I'm not using a Glencairn. I'm not at home. I'm at a friend's house and they're...
You don't have to apologise. There's some people drink out of Alaska mug as well.
They're a beast. They don't even have a Glencairn.
How dare they?
I know. Choose your friends better. But so Adam had his glass to his nose and he was, doing everything that people do, smelling the dram, looking at the legs on it, seeing just really taking their time with it, nosing the whiskey, and then pulled it away from his nose and he goes, how often do you ever hear someone say, oh God, that's so efficiently made, isn't it? That's just so efficient. And never, obviously, but that is the reality of a lot of whiskey production. And Bruichladdich kind of tried to, I guess, be a be the antidote to that, looking into small batch, looking into heritage grains, looking into to varietals, looking into old varietals, new varietals, not just looking for yield. So we kind of work with people like the James Hutton Institute, who are a barley breeder, but the opposite way. We're looking at, okay, we don't just want literage per ton, we want flavor flavor from the barley and not just yield. And so that's what leads us into doing things like the organic, the bear, the first ever biodynamic Scotch, things like that, because it's how can there not be flavor in there?
I just think it's mad as well that out of 3 ingredients, one of them is just so kind of like, the barley, it's from there. Like,
yes.
It just seems so ridiculous when that's not the case with many other drinks. So I think that's it. That's why it's so interesting to me. And with like maybe with Waterford, it's the same kind of thing. And then that transparency on top of that, which is like the compass box thing, which, where you can really see where everything's coming from. And it's the same with Bruichladdich. And I think that's why people really, really love it. And I think in this day and age, you can't fool people as much as you used to. And they want to know more, and they want to know where everything's come from. They want to know why this one might taste different, and why that barley has made a difference to this one. And I think that's super interesting.
Definitely. The thing for us with transparency was it was actually, so with the classic laddie, I don't know if people know the classic laddie, but the bottle I showed before, it's like our signature style. So it's unpeated, 100% Scottish barley. We only use Scottish barley, 100% Isla matured. We only mature on Isla, which is quite unusual.
Well, the thing you're talking about time and place as well. Like, when you have that Isla whiskey, all from Isla.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a non-age statement whiskey, and we actually have put a batch code on that so that even with our non-age statement whiskies, there is full transparency, because why should you not be able to tell people exactly what goes into it? It's fair enough if you don't, if that's not what you want to do, but for us, we want, like you said, people have so much information available now anyway, and so people want to know more, and rightly so. It's the same in food, it's the same in other drinks like wines and things like that. Even in clothing, just the way people are acting now, it's sort of people's values are becoming a bit more to the forefront. And so being able to give people all of that information for us is huge, and it kind of is part of I'm sure everybody might have heard, or maybe not, because I actually didn't know what it meant when we first got it. But in March 2020, we got our B Corp certification. And a B Corp company, basically, it's just a community of businesses that can prove that they're acting to the highest level of social, environmental, community, things like that. And it was so nice for us because we are always trying to do the best we can for the environment and also the best we can. Community is such a huge thing that I think is not spoken about as much. Obviously, sustainability is constantly spoken about, and rightly so, but community as well. And so that was just kind of a nice validation of how we have always acted as a company, but it's our values sort of.
I think community is important just in Scotch in general, like for most distilleries. But that does bring me on to your Uncle Vanya's question for you, which when we talk about sustainability is what happens with the idea of ditching the tins, the metal tins.
So that is an ongoing project at the distillery, obviously, and especially in the last couple of years, things have not moved as quickly as they could at all. So maybe people will have seen that we did the 1 tin lighter initiative. 1 tin lighter was an initiative. Basically, it was a pilot from the distillery. So obviously, there's huge supply chains with all products, but we did an initiative from the distillery that you could opt out of having your tin when you got your bottle. And it was really interesting. When we first put that online, I was so interested to see how it would go. As someone who also, I wouldn't say collects because I drink a lot, but I have a lot of bottles too. I don't want to see my bottle count here because I feel like I'm just about to try and move them from England to Scotland, which I
had to do this recently. And I've got to say, I drove slower than I've ever driven before with my whiskey collection in my car journeys. And I swear I drove slower with my whiskey collection in my car than I did with my newborn baby. It was quite I was very panicking.
A baby's more shatterproof, I would imagine.
I'd say so.
They're made to bounce.
That's exactly it. I feel I'm just aware of time because we are. Let's talk about this dram.
Yes. Sorry, I am.
No, please talk away. We're here to listen to you. So, and I think you might be our only guest tonight.
That's all right. If you stick 50p in me, I can talk for hours. So the dram we're having tonight, something that's unbelievably exciting for us, and actually something that I've really fallen back in love with recently. So, like I said, at Bruichladdich, we focus massively on raw ingredient. what difference that makes to the flavor. You know, barley for us is not just a commodity, it is a flavor in our whiskey. Obviously, we make whiskey on site. Like I said, it's matured, it's bottled on Islay using Islay spring water. We are aware that wood makes a difference to flavor. We're aware that time makes a difference, but how can barley not make a difference to the flavor? So this is part of our barley exploration range. At the same time comes out an Islay barley. So obviously barley grown in Islay. People sometimes say to me, what's the difference between the Scotch barley and what's the difference between the Islay barley? And I'm like, don't say 400 miles as a crow flies, but that is it, basically. So it comes from Islay. Then we have the Bear barley, which is our heritage grain, which is Neolithic grain, 6-row varietal, comes from Orkney, from Agronomy Institute. If anyone wants to talk about that at the end, it's like my specialist mastermind subject, so please do. But also at the same time, and it comes out the organic, and the organic is one that I do not drink as often. Well, historically haven't drunk as often because I am obsessed with the Bear barley. So I've had such a really, really amazing reacquaintance with the organic in the last maybe 6 months because it's just been in more tastings. People have asked for it in tastings, and it's so for me just such a great example of the difference that barley varietal will make to your spirit. So this is the organic 2009. With this, we work exclusively with a farm called Midcool Farm in Inverness-shire. Midcool is an organic farm. We actually are part of their 7 crop rotation. So at Bruichladdich, we're, along with our B Corp certification, it's made us really passionate about looking into sustainable agronomy and how we can get our barley with as little intervention as possible. That's not to say we'll ever be 100% organic, because that's just not realistic. But it's just another way for us to, first of all, look at how we can be less impactful on the environment when we're growing our agricultural crops, but also what's the flavor, what difference does that make? And for us, so the first ever distillation of this was 2003 of the organic. And when it came off the stills, the guys already were saying, you know, it's the texture, I think, for me with the organic. The texture is like, Bruichladdich is very, very rich anyway and oily because we don't chill filter, we don't add colouring, which won't affect the texture, but it's just, we want it to come as natural as possible. But with the organic, it's just so creamy, the flavour. So this is, like I said, the 2009 organic. It is 8 years old and a mixture of bourbon and Tennessee whiskey casks. With the barley exploration range, we want you to taste the barley. It sounds so silly to say whiskey tastes like barley, but people don't talk about that. That's what we want you to taste. We want you to taste the nuances of that varietal, what difference it makes. So I would say, I think it's really creamy, but also really fresh, a little grassy. You get some candied orange, I would say. Because of the 100% Islay maturation, you'll get a little salty tang to the whiskey.
Yeah. I'm going to read out quite a few because we've got tons and tons of tasting notes. We'll see what's going on with the taster. That's the issue with not drinking from a Glencairn as well. As too.
Yeah.
Real boinger. Nose, citrusy orange, as we're saying, saltiness, tiny bit of vanilla custard. Pesho, yeah, it's a lovely aroma. Jeffster, getting a hint of cinnamon on the nose along with buttery vanilla. Joe F, getting tea on the nose now too. Mike Wally, Bruichladdich, sweet barley sugars. Joe F, more tea on the palate with that peppered spice with an orange edge towards the finish. So a lot of people getting that kind of orange, candied orange kind of note you were talking about. Reverend Kevin Wright, Hill by the Beach is conjuring up a wonderful picture which enhances the dram. Awesome. This is the first Bruichladdich for green tea is green, lovely light nose, tangerine touch vanilla. Pesho, it's really sweet on the back palate. Green tea is green, taste is good. That's a proper whiskey, that is. Jester, licorice on the palate for me, quite creamy with a spicy finish. Chris Randall, lovely pale colour with citrus and medicinal notes. As you said, it's that lovely natural colour that we've got here. Nothing added to this. Stuart, pilling. Peppery on the finish. Gareth Peters, yes, this is one for the list. Joe F, after a taste and the dram on the glass, I'm getting milk chocolate on the nose. Peter Gilmore, I can smell it even from a distance, not too strong on the nose. Reverend Kevin Wright, being organic also adds another tick for me. Just briefly, again, talk to us about exactly what organic means. Is that as well about the pesticides? There's no pesticides used on the barley as well in the farming process?
Of course. So basically at Midkill Farm, they're committed to using no pesticides, insecticides, any of that. There's no chemicals when they farm. It's kind of amazing. They kind of do both sides. If you're really nerdy into stuff like this, like me, and go on barley seminars for 3 hours, and they do things like so the crop rotation. That's like one of the oldest methods of low intervention farming, but they also have anaerobic digesters, so 2 of them, which means they can make the most of their like grass silage and things like that, put that through them, and then they'll fertilize the soil as well. So yeah, super interesting. They also have they have beasts on the farm as well. So like I said, we're a part of a 7-year crop rotation cycle. 1 year will be our barley.
Okay, that's amazing. There's a few more comments. Like, quite a lot of comments coming in, and a lot of questions. Mike Pizzari, milk chocolate. There's a really creamy kind of milk chocolate note, and maybe Maltesers as well that's coming through on the palate, because malty notes as well. Quite an alcoholic bite to it, but it is 50%. A little orange oil in the aftertaste. Unless I'm wrong, is 50% a kind of standard?
Yeah, so at Bruichladdich, obviously you can chill filter below 46%. So historically, since we reopened in 2001, we would have been about 46%. But I'm sure most people will be aware of Jim McCune, who was our ex-master distiller. He trialed all of our drams and decided that 50% was how they came best. So yes, people get a fright sometimes, but I'll say you can add water, you can't take it away. So bang for your buck as well.
We've had some serious. I think we had something which was, I can't remember, maybe last week I think it was 64. So these pour and sippers are used to very high strength.
Good.
Your Uncle Van, you're saying #bring your own Glencairn everywhere you go.
I know. I must have left about 5 on Isla as well. I've just come from Isla. I'm a fraud. I'm a fraud.
Green is green. The milk chocolate side is interesting. It is after quaffing a bit, or just the way the nose develops, I wonder. Simon, getting a hint of honey sweet, then that lasting peppery finish. Colin Barkett, this is a lovely dram. I feel purchase coming on. Jen Freeman, really lovely, the Bear Barley one as well. Malcolm Tucker, what's the difference in flavour profile between the two?
So the Bear Barley is really unusual, which is part of what we want to display when we're doing this. Like, if they don't taste any different, that's fine. They can go into something else. But for us, obviously, having a 6-row, so Bear Barley, so conventional barley goes up in 2s. Everybody's seen barley before, I'd imagine. Bear Barley goes round in 6s, and it's very, very dense grain with a lot more husk. So you lose hundreds of litres per tonne every time you mash Bear Barley, and so it's efficiency-wise terrible. But the flavour is just so unusual. I think with Bear Barley it can be quite earthy, quite digestive biscuits. Again, obviously it's barley driven. That's what we want you to taste. But you also get this amazing like stone fruits, tropical. The reason I love it is because it's so polarizing, and that's, I think, what great things are. Like, you either really like it or you don't. And so I would say it's less conventional tasting. There's a few people have done Bear Barleys. I think Aaron and Springbank are the other 2 that have done them. And it's hard work. Like, the first time we mashed Bear, it broke our open top mash tun, which and that we got second hand in 1881. And because it just comes so tightly compacted, because there's much less starch, it just turns to cement unless you do different waters and different, it can't be treated the same. But we find that with everything. Like I say, we're talking about trying to sort of do sustainable agronomy on Isla. So obviously you can't just keep growing barley on top of barley on top of barley. It doesn't work. So we're looking at how we can sort of make Isla an accessible market. So we can look at, what can people grow crop rotation wise that we can still buy or help them sell? And that's led to more innovation for us. So now we're doing Isla Grown Rye. We've done the first ever Isla Grown Rye, which is in cask, that came from one of the barley producers, because it means that they're still producing, we can buy it. So we're not asking them to produce. We pay a premium for everything that's grown in Isla, because the yield is about 1/3 of the mainland. But a premium of nothing is still not very much. So if we can make sure that in the years that we're giving back to the soil and making sure the soil is the best quality, so we can look into innovation in our spirit production. So it's exciting.
That is exciting. I suppose this is all where that kind of progressive distillers idea comes from, isn't it? That's always on the bottles, is all of this kind of stuff.
Definitely.
P. Burrett, add a drop of water to open it up to new flavors, a real quality dram. Where do you stand on that with this? I mean, because obviously everyone always asks that question on pour and sit. I always try and add a drop or two of water after trying it neat. Is this one that will stand up to water? Well,
so yeah, I would say. Oh, sorry, I just jumped to you.
I
would say probably yes. I would say. I mean, I would say all Bruichladdich take water. Like you said, you had a 64% on last week. Like at Bruichladdich, because we keep everything for our own single malt, we don't actually take it down to industry standard 63.5 to start maturation. So we actually start maturation at 68.5 to 69%, which is straight off the still. So I'm sure everybody will know this already, but just in case they don't, industry standard would be to take the casks down to 63.5, which makes it easier if you trade barrels, but we keep everything for single malt, so we don't have to do that. So yeah, sometimes we're releasing whiskies higher than some people start maturation, like you were saying about your 64% last week. So I would say I would always try neat, and I drink Bruichladdich all day, every day. So I'm kind of I'm kind of used to that strength, and I actually kind of chase this, not chase, but I prefer something stronger because I'm used to drinking strength. But they will definitely take liquid. But the only thing that I would say that sometimes you might lose a little bit with a Bruichladdich, especially, not one of the peaters, is
an Optimore.
Yeah, well, but I think the Bruichladdich sometimes, because we don't chill filter, it kind of breaks up the oiliness if you add too much, of course.
Yeah.
But it's whatever you prefer.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to read a few more notes out. Mike Wally, getting reminds of seagrass on the nose, sand dunes on the Solway as a child. I don't know where that is, but I love it when whiskey kind of makes this kind of nostalgic memory for you that takes you to a time and place, and that's the whole point of it. I'm being told I can run long because unfortunately David has had a family bereavement from Edrington, so me and Christy will talk about Bowmore and Laphroaig. Almos Cam, this is very interesting. Somehow reminds me of several batches of ex-bourbon Springbank local barley. Absolutely, and everyone will know that's one of my favourites. Peter Gilmore, let's get a whip round to keep talking. This is the 50p. I think everyone wants to put some more 50p's in here. Mike Pizarro, water does sweeten it a bit. Ali C, yes, more on the bare barley. Your Uncle Vanya would love to listen about the bare barley. Yes, please. Just back from Orkney, so that was a big topic with the locals and farmers there. I hope we covered that to a point. Anthony Mullins, yes, I agree. Air is really challenging it. And Malcolm Tucker, I'm sure I only got a half full bottle sample as my glass is empty. Bruce Edwards has just donated another 50p, Abby. Mike Pizarro, the bare barley is fantastic. I had the Laphroaig group tasting last night, and that was only second to the Optimore 12.1. I am aware that we had asked the question, because Optimore is a really kind of, people love to talk about Optimore. So do give us a little bit about Optimore as well. For everyone who hasn't tried an Optimore yet or doesn't know what it is.
Okay, well, I'm going to be cheeky and I'm going to have an Optimore while I'm talking about it. Since everybody else has got a Laphroaig. So Optimore. This is Optimore. This is actually a really special bottle that I didn't realize I leave bottles around friends' flats and forget that they're theirs.
You should come back one day. You know you've got a bottle there.
And I was like, oh God, what do I have? Because everyone was getting bottles out. And I went into the cupboard and this bottle is, well, don't tell anyone I've got it, basically. So this is Optimore. Optimore means the large 8th in Gaelic, and it is, as everybody I'm sure is aware, the world's most heavily peated whiskey, the world's most heavily peated spirit. Optimore is the name of a farm that is just down the road from Bruichladdich. And kind of a couple of different reasons for Optimore, really. First of all, we're very experimental as a distillery, like I was talking about, whether it's age, terroir, barley varietal, cask type. We were kind of the first people to really go crazy with casks. Now, obviously, most people do that. But back when we started doing it, like I said, it was wine merchants that opened Bruichladdich. And so that was the cheap casks that we could get. You know, we didn't have any money. That's our unofficial tagline, is when we had no money. And so it kind of pushes you in ways. And people ask Adam all the time, how did you know how to do that? For example, like mashing the rye. And he's like, I didn't. We just have to do it. And so that's how we do it. But anyway, so Optimore is the world's most heavily peated spirit. I found out not too long ago that Optimore actually came to be because to make our Port Charlotte heavily peated, we peat it always to 40 ppm. And so to get exactly 40 ppm is hard. Malting isn't an exact science. We use a method called salad boxing, which we're actually building on site at the moment, which is very exciting. But basically, they would push the ppm as high as they could, and then cut it with unpeated malt, and that would get them exactly 40 ppm. And so Jim McCune was out with the gentleman from Baird's Maltings. Baird's is who do our maltings at the moment until we get our site up and running at the distillery. And he said, well, what happens with that super heavily peated malt? Has anyone ever tried to use it? What would it taste like? And the guy was like, well, no, why would you? It would be disgusting. It would be undrinkable. And so Jim McCune said, send me a batch, and that's how the first Optimore came to be. So it's kind of like it's always a what if at the distillery, I guess. Like, what if we tried that? And then we do. And it doesn't always work, but I think that's how experimentation,
Absolutely. And they're releasing, is it three batches every time, or is it?
Yeah, so it depends on the release. But the 0.1, this is, I think I'll be saying this on my deathbed. Yeah. But the first number is the edition. So at the moment we're on 12. We were in line with iPhones, but I think they've just gone now. 0.2 is travel retail. So this year it was a Sauterne cask, and actually came into domestic because travel retail wasn't really in a place. And the one I've got here, which I'm very, very lucky to have, is the 0.3. So this 0.3 is from Optimore Farm barley. So the barley is grown at the distillery. You can see the distillery. Optimore Farm is where we get all of our water out of the ground, crystal clear spring water. So everything in this bottle comes from like a couple square miles. And this one is particularly exciting as well for a lot of people who drink whiskey. Everybody loves sherry casks. So we have always been very strict on sherry. Like transparency, like you said, is a major thing for us, and transparency in the cask industry hasn't always been where we would want it to be necessarily for us. So so we don't want to just say sherry. We want to say Fino. We want to say PX. We want to say whatever. So we work with Fernando de Castilla. So this one is 75% bourbon maturation full term and 25% PX full term maturation.
Awesome. I've just gone down, and there are so many questions for you. And once we get through the questions, Christy, loads more comments coming in. Pat Cowling, love the nose, love the taste, love the quality. Bottle 19 sorted of his collection. Reverend Kevin Wright, just realised I'm licking my lips. Must be the saltiness. Ali C, smooth malt and butter at first, then moving into deeper chocolate notes, but of an almost rye hit of grass, going to citrus oil finish. Ian Jambarain, welcome back, Ian. I really get the taste the barley comment. I definitely get that with this dram. Really enjoyed this one. Pesho, is there high nitrogen too?
That's well. So beer is it beer barley?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of the oldest landrace grains. It was found in Neolithic campsites in Orkney. That's why the Agronomy Institute decided to bring it back. So I would say so, because it really, even though it hates growing on Islay, we did try and grow it once, and when we did have one release of it, it likes poor quality soil. So yes, I would imagine high nitrogen would be something that it would thrive in. Yeah.
Okay. Mike Pizarro, wait, what? You're making a rye? Jen Freeman, how soon will the rye be available?
That's a bit above my pay grade, but I can tell you it was delicious. We've had some bottles in market just to see what people think of it, and it was I think I bought a 3-year-old or a 3-year-old, I think I have. Even though doing things like that is so out of the box that we don't even know what to call it. It's technically it's sort of its own thing. So it's 55% malted barley and 45% unmalted rye is the bill. So who knows? But honestly, we were making drinks. Well, we were drinking it probably it's probably about 6 years old now, actually. So I would keep your eyes open.
Everybody keep your eyes open.
The best way to Bruichladdich is the newsletter. It's honestly, it doesn't spam you, and it's how you find out the best stuff.
We sign up to that on the, can our subscribers sign up to that on the website, I take it?
Yeah.
There you go, people. And then you'll get the first, you'll be the first to know. Alex Antonio, why isn't all grain used organic, assuming it's better because it doesn't have pesticides?
Just like functionality, I guess. Like, well, for a start, to become organically certified, you have to have literally nothing on your land for, I think, minimum 5 years. And a lot of farms just can't take that hit for 5 years without growing. On Isla especially, like I said already, the yield is about a third of it is on the mainland. So trying to grow organically on the island, it's not out with the realms of possibility, but I think it would just mean that the yield would be maybe just unmanageable. I don't know. But we have just bought a croft on the island just next to the distillery, which means we can start patch testing different varietals, and we can look into that because we want to have as little intervention as we can with the earth when we are growing barley, especially on Isla. Well, everywhere, to be honest. But is it? We can see it firsthand on the island. So looking at things that we can grow that will be the lowest intervention. So yeah, that's something that we started just before COVID, and then obviously basically we have to start weeding for a while. we did the patch tests, but then there was nobody there. So yeah, that is something we're looking into, how we can go forward with the lowest intervention on the soil, or putting back in as much as we can.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Abby. That's been absolutely amazing. There are actually quite a few unanswered questions, but we do need to taste the other two drams.
Of course. I'll hang about it anyway.
There's about 3 or 4 unanswered questions here. So I'll make a note of those if you have asked, and we can ask Abby once we've done our Laphroaig and Bowmore very quick tasting. But thank you very much for joining us, and I'll ask Christy back. Hello, Christy.
Hello, that was so fascinating. Thank you so much, Abby. I absolutely love that. What a deep dive into all things barley. I feel like I'm almost qualified to be a farmer now, which I love. That was awesome. We'll zip you off, but yeah, do hang around if you can, and we'll do any other little questions at the end. But also, if we don't get through any, would it be all right to send you an email? And we could always do a little follow-up afterwards.
100%. Yes.
Perfect. Fabulous. Thank you again. Catch you soon.
No worries.
Bye, Abby.
Oh, what a spectacular start to our Isla box. I love that.
Yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. Now, in the interest of time, and we have been stood up by our second guest, everyone, which I will try not to take personally, but it's okay, because when you have another guest as fabulous as Abby and we can chat for ages, it's all good. It's all good. So Andy and myself, we're going to spend 15 minutes or so chatting through the other 2 drams of the evening. We've got Bowmore and Laphroaig. Now, I think they happen to go really well together because not only have they got the same parent company, so Adrington Beam Suntory, I guess you could say, well, same distribution company as well. So yeah, really fascinating, really interesting. The structure of the industry is fascinating, and maybe that would be something to do on the blog at some point. A bit of an overview of like the big suppliers and the distilleries they have. So these two, they're not quite neighbours on Isla. Bowmore's sort of halfway down, and it's quite a nice thing to remember because I sort of think it's sort of halfway up the peated scale, shall we say. So it's got a bit of peat going in, I think 20 to 30 ppm parts per million, whereas the Laphroaig is much more heavily peated. So if you've got both drams in front of you and you knows each of them.
We're starting with Bowmore, right, out of these.
We're going to start with Bowmore. I'm ready with them both. Yeah. I love a bit of a comparison. But so if you do have them both, you can hover your nose over the top and you'll hopefully be able to pick out the differences in terms of peat levels. So that's really interesting. But starting off with Bowmore, Andy, have you been out to Bowmore Distillery?
I have not.
It's really gorgeous.
Like your trip to Bowmore.
Yes, I know. I feel like I'm like, when I went to Isla, this happened a bit today. But no, Bowmore's really gorgeous. It's one of the sort of main towns on Isla, the biggest town, I think. And the distillery sort of right by the shore. There's a little bit of a beach there. They use the heat from the distillery to heat the local swimming pool, which I love. Bit of a community project right there, which is very, very cool. But this we have here, 15 years old. And as I say, we're going to go through these super quickly. So yeah, I love the nose of this. So we've got Oloroso casks going on here. I think a 3-year finish, which I would say is more of a secondary maturation. I don't know what you think, Andy. I think 3 years is a fairly hefty finish.
That is not usual kinds of finishing lengths. I always recommend Bowmore as like a kind of entry level Isla whiskey, because it's not as offensive as Laphroaig, Ardbeg, and Lagavulin to a certain extent. And I always get these kind of sweet, again, the sherry element in this one is quite prominent, and it does mask in some way the heavy peatiness of it. So I often say when people don't like peat in general, that Bowmore is not a bad place to start.
I do know what you mean, but also I do feel like there's a note of caution to be added there in terms of assuming people. I'm interested to hear what you all think, sort of pour and sippers, because I've had friends who think they don't like whiskey, and the whiskies that they've tasted have been unpeated, and they think they don't like it. And then you waft a Laphroaig under their nose, and suddenly they love it, and it's really fascinating.
Sorry. By the way, I was going to say that to Abby earlier, who everybody, by the way, is saying. Peter Gilmore's said, "Stop, keep Abby talking." Mike Pizzaro, Abby needs to come back at least 3 times a year. Your Uncle Vanya, great guest, so awesome stuff. Laphroaig was my gateway dram. Like, so it's a palate thing. Like, usually people are like, "Oh God, that's the thing that put me off whiskey, is that smoky style. I didn't like it at all." But Laphroaig was the one that I tried. The Laphroaig 10, I was like, "Oh man, I absolutely love that. That's the one." So yeah, it's different for different people. But I often say, people say, "I don't like smoky whiskey," or "I don't like Isla whiskey." Bowmore's not a bad place to start, because there is a sweeter element to it with the sherry maturation, and then also on top of that, it's not quite as heavily peated. Was it 40 ppm you were saying?
20 to 25, I think.
20, because yeah,
like around that mark.
Ardbeg level. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think you said earlier, there's definitely like a floral element to it that I really like with Bowmore. I think the other thing to add, Bowmore is such a historical distillery. I think it's the second oldest in Scotland, and if you ever like go round it, you'll see these dunnage warehouses. By dunnage, we mean the sort of like dusty floors. They're quite low ceilings, barrels only like 2 or 3 high. Like, it really is like such a historic place. We get very excited, rightly so, about new distilleries coming through, and it's fascinating, I think, to see new distillery architecture. Another one, obviously, in the Edrington Beam Suntory family is Mcallen, and if you look at pictures of their brand new distillery, it feels so futuristic, and like a James Bond villain lair. Bowmore is almost the opposite. It's so old. I think it's from like the late 1700s.
Okay, I mean, there's nothing. I mean, that's the romanticism of whiskey that we have. It's all great. I mean, and we'll talk about Bruichladdich as well. Open very, not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, reopened, and it's great. Progressive distillers, it's amazing. But then there's also this time and place for something quite so old and quite so traditional that's still going. And you go to the distillery and everything is literally still the same as it was back then.
Yeah,
and
it's amazing.
That you should be able to taste in the whiskey. So quite a lot of comments here. Steve Conwell, so Bowmore, my wedding present from my wife. Laphroaig, my first peated whiskey, which will win. I know what I'm going to choose. Green tea is green. Pizzaro, I could listen to her speaking Gaelic and talking about bear barley for hours. Guys, Jeffster, there's a nice guest house at Bowmore. Chrissy, you stayed there?
I have not. I've never been invited to the guest house.
Somebody here wrote, Malcolm Tucker, Christy, have you been to Isla? I didn't know.
Why have I been to Isla?
So, Mike Pizzaro, historically, I've preferred Bowmore to Laphroaig. Let's see how I feel now. Interesting. Yeah. Historically, I don't struggle to admit it. I don't. Chris Dagnan, Bowmore is sweeter indeed than other Islas. Chris Randall, aging the Bowmore for 15 years will soften the peatiness. Jared, Laphroaig 10 was also my first intro into whiskey. Blew my mind. It was the same for me. Like I love really big old flavors. So it really blew my mind. So I was just like, wow, I've not tried anything like that. Whereas some people have the reaction, which is like, oh my God, gross, what is that?
Yeah,
They then assume that all whiskey is smoky and that kind of drink, and then don't realise that these are much kind of Speyside, fresh, aromatic kinds of drams that aren't smoky. Real Boinger, nose, smoky, wood, leather with dried fruits. Reverend Kevin Wright, I'm loving the nose on both. I started my Isla journey with Bowmore. That's what I'm saying. It's often I hear that. Peter Gilmore, you get the medical smell at the end of the nose too. Malcolm Tucker, Laphroaig 10 was my entry, as that's what the student bar stocked. Good student bar. Mine stocked Jack Daniels. Mike Pizzaro, the Bowmore 12 is one of my regular tipples. Last time I had the quarter cask, was really early on in my whiskey journey. I found it a bit overpowering. Yes, Colin Bathgate. That, unfortunately, I mean, when I say unfortunately, a lot of whiskey brands add colour. We were just talking about Bruichladdich, which don't, but unless I'm wrong, Bowmore still do and have done.
And I think I'm gonna have a soapbox moment that happens every so often with pour and sip. I find it a little bit frustrating sometimes when I have done this in the past, and I still do it now sometimes. You get that slight little sink of disappointment if like colour's been added. But I sometimes think that if colour has been added, like I kind of think like, so what? As a consumer, I'd like to know. And what I think is, if I'm not told it's natural colour, I'm going to assume the colour's there, but it doesn't affect the flavour, it doesn't affect the aroma, unless you've gone crazy over the top with it, which this one hasn't.
No,
I'm quite
it
chill
also
about
depends on the type of dram as well. The Bowmore 15 you can pick up in Sainsbury's for whatever. It's the same as the Bowmore 12, and that's that's a thing. There's also a consistency thing here. Whereas, let's say, I don't know, when we're talking about Bruichladdich, then obviously something might not be able. You might not get the organic 2009 in the supermarket. So I don't know. I think that's also something to consider. When you're talking about adding colouring, but as Christy said, it doesn't affect the flavour. So yeah, Colin Bathgate loves the colour, but it is helpful to know. I do, particularly when you're talking about maturation. I mean, 3 years in Oloroso cask, you'd expect that it would have gone as a finish. It would have gone a bit darker in colour. Obviously,
I was going to say, I suspect this is more for like consistency correction rather than to make it look older, because it's 15 years old. We know that they're verified that that's the minimum age, and we know that Oloroso cask can be like super active and contribute loads and loads and loads of colour. So again,
it's the same thing. You won't often walk into. I mean, I'm not big enough, but you won't walk into the supermarket and see many 15-year-old whiskies which boldly state 15-year-old single malt on them, like you will with this one. So, I mean, that's why I think it's personally a great dram, and I wouldn't look too much into the kind of, do they add colour? Is it chill filtered kind of thing?
But I do really appreciate the question, because I think it's such an interesting conversation point, and I love it. And just one more remark before we move on to Laphroaig, just in the interest of time. Bowmore 15-year-old is one of the ones for me. With pour and sip, we often talk about, like, we want to show you the new stuff, the stuff we're really excited about because it's brand new. We also want to show you and share with you like our old favourites. And for me, 15-year-old Bowmore is such a classic. I think it came out in something like 2007, but I love it. It's consistently good. It's a treat.
Packaging is still, very old school. There's no kind of frills. It's not particularly fancy, but there's a time and a place for that, in my opinion. And it's like a classic old school whiskey. In my 15-year-old single malt, you can get a really decent value. Peaty, lovely. Sherry cask, wonderful.
It's good stuff. Also, Reverend Kevin Wright has made a really great point before we do move on. But this is true with all whiskies, and I think wine, and I think food sometimes, that colour can affect the perceived taste, as we do have an expectation of taste from our eyes. That is such a great point, and I really, really agree with that. And I think as we all get a bit geekier about what we're drinking, you can assess it. But I do think colour, you can hold it quite loosely. I think if we're aware that we can be perhaps, our eyes like, oh, that looks a certain way, I might expect lots of like sherry flavour from it, and then maybe you don't. I think it's something to be aware of rather than something that's good or bad. But that's such a great point.
But I think that is a really good point. But I think, as you said, like in general, like the darker the color, you just assume. I mean, this has got sherry cask in it anyway. But obviously, it's not affecting the flavour, but your eyes will perceive it as going, oh, this is like heavy sherry bomb, possibly.
And I love it, Chris Randall. It's a very comfortable dram. I think the same. It's like when you go and have a hug from like your old friend. It's just cozy.
I think everyone has this kind of dram that they associate with. That's like the go-to kind of old school classic dram. It's like putting on your old pair of jeans, and just like that. Everyone has that kind of dram. So I mean, Laphroaig tends that for me. So it's Anyway,
and on Laphroaig, in the interest of time, so you are going to run long. I don't know if people have tried quarter casks before. This is another one that is kind of like a bit of a classic for me. Quarter casks, to give you a rundown. So let's say a standard barrel is like 200 litres or so. Maths is not my strong point. Quarter cask, literally, it's like a quarter of the size. So you'd expect this to be around 50 litres instead of 200. Why does that matter? What's the point? Smaller cask, less whiskey. But smaller casks also mean the greater surface area to liquid ratio. And the casks are where we get so much of our flavour from with whiskey. And it's the interaction between the spirit and the cask that gives us all these really wonderful like notes of maturation. So when we get sort of vanilla and coconut, and also where we get things like orange peel, all of these, but also the previous contents of the cask. So when we talk about Oloroso sherry before for the Bowmore, it's the contact with the cask where you get that flavour from. So this, I don't think it's got a finish on it, but I'm very happy to be corrected. I think it's all ex-bourbon. But I'm just having a little note. Yeah, quarter casks to finish it off. So it will get that extra hit of that oak influence from being in the small cask for a little bit. It kind of almost like accelerates it, I guess.
It's such a musty nose for me. It comes like this, like it's a meat and cheese note for me. That's there. That's kind of like glazed kind of meat with some kinds of cheese in there as well. That's like, and it's really musty oak in there, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's fabulous. I really want to hear people's thoughts on Laphroaig. Obviously, very conscious of time, but let us know what you think. Is Laphroaig a Marmite dram for you? Do we love it? Do we hate it? Are any people who thought that they weren't into peat convinced by the Bowmore or Laphroaig? That's what I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I mean, Pansbear saying liking the Bowmore, almost a Frazzles crisp smell. Absolutely, that kind of bacony kinds of notes. Green Seas Green saying agreeing with Reverend Kevin Wright's wife, whiskey soaked fruit. Anyway, Ian Jamborain, the nose on Laphroaig is fantastic. Simon, Laphroaig is buttery, creamy, peaty, so amazing.
It's good stuff. It's really good stuff. I feel like we could talk about Laphroaig for ages because I don't think there's anything in the world that tastes like Laphroaig. I think every distillery has its distillery character for sure. Like Bruichladdich and Optimore character, you can pick it out. You can with Bowmore, obviously. I think you can with loads and loads and loads. But for me, Laphroaig has such a singular element to it that's so pronounced, just so delicious. It's like beach bonfires with like oranges and raisins. And I think there's so much fruit in there as well as the smoke. And it's just, I love it. I'm absolutely obsessed with it.
Wonderful hospital floor kind of baby wipes kind of note that comes through, tarry kind of coal note that comes through Laphroaig all the time. It's my favourite of the Islas just because the Laphroaig 10 cask strength has always been my favourite Isla. In every batch has always been brilliant for me. This is amazing. I have to say there's a lovely sweetness to it on the back palate that I absolutely love. A kind of biscuity note as well that I really like. Mike Zorro is playing catch up now. Green Tea is Green. Rain Laphroaig quarter cask is a favourite, my go-to comfort dram. Ian Jambo Rain, absolutely meaty, agree. Chris Dagnan, buttery biscuit base. As I was saying, I mean, I absolutely love this. I think, Chris Dagnan, any idea of the age of the I don't personally.
I don't know. I think I've heard people say before, sort of like between sort of 5 and 9 years. And this is the thing with no age statements is that obviously we know that to be whiskey, it's minimum 3 years in oak. But I think the joy with no age statements, which I think we see more in terms of transparency because they can with some Irish blends. I remember when we had JJ Corrie on here before, they've shared with us the exact age of the component parts. There'll probably be some young whiskies in this. There'll also be older whiskies in this. I guess kind of the charm is in the blend and not really knowing.
Yep. I think like when talking to Abby earlier, there's also quite a lot. It's really nice to know, but then there is also a charm as well in the kind of mystery of a blend and wondering and doing that kind of work for yourself and going, is this an old whiskey? Can I taste younger whiskey in here? All of that kind of stuff. So it really is, it really depends. However, I am a big fan of the transparency kind of thing.
I am as well. And I think I'm very pro the kind of like the rules from the Scotch Whisky Association really kind of like protecting the character of the category. But I would, in my personal capacity, like to see some relaxation around transparency. I get how it can be confusing though, and I understand why it's there. But if we have the option to know more, I think that'd be really good.
I don't think it should be like an absolute kind of mandatory thing, but it's nice to have it, and it's nice to know when. That's why I personally love Bruichladdich, and it's why I personally love Compass Box, for example. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with it if there's not, because there's also like, who cares? Like sometimes you just want to drink a good dram. If you like the Laphroaig quarter cask, does it matter? Just drink it and enjoy it.
Completely.
It literally doesn't matter. And it's also nice to know on other times going, I wonder how old this non-age statement whiskey is. I wonder what's gone into this blend, for example.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just going to rattle through some tasting notes. There's quite a few here. Malcolm Tucker, the nose is full on, salt caramel, cooked meats, yes, frazzles, peat and smoke, only slight hint of TCP. Anthony Mullins, wasn't expecting that. I can smell where there's sweets on Laphroaig. Yes, there's such a sweetness in there too. Joe F, oh wow, the Laphroaig is wonderful on the palate. That thick bonfire peat slap, charred, more salted bacon, amazing. Jeffster, I can't choose between any of the three tonight. I've been to Islay twice and I'll be going back again. Apart from the series, it's a beautiful island. That's a good point, actually. While we're reading this out, let us know your faves.
Jeffster, I mean, you're well ahead of it. I mean, this is a regular here who knows.
He's a regular. So Almos, who potentially is a new name, welcome along. The nose is much more gentle than their regular 10, more vanilla and indeed much more buttery. Mike, Laphroaig is where I picked up whiskey again. I love it. Steve Common Williams, the spiciness of the quarter cask is stunning. Wish I had it yesterday with Nando's. Oh, don't
Which
even.
Still hasn't had.
Still haven't had Nando's.
Unless you have in the space of time that we discussed it last.
There's some time has passed. Barry, Laphroaig QC is one I've neglected for a while. Glad to be reminded how much I enjoy it. I'm glad to have reminded you. Alex, it's almost cave-aged cheese musky notes. I get that, definitely. Meaty, smoked glazed ham. I think the quarter cask ranks above the 10-year-old for me. The consistent, tarry, dockyard rope flavour balanced by the sweetness.
Love that.
What a tasting note. Yeah. I'm just going to read a couple more. Your Uncle Vanya, first time I tried the quarter cask, I was disappointed, then got the cask strength ones and cherry finish ones, and now going back to the quarter cask. I'm loving it. Great news. P. Burrett, beautifully smooth, full flavoured caramel smoke bomb, first class.
I'm loving, real boinga, the nose. Maybe hearing about the meat. I got ham like Spanish jamon. Oh my God. That is my absolute favourite.
Right. I think we should see if Abby is ready to come back and join us. I'm going to give her a heads up because I can see her camera is off. But here she is. I'm going to zip her back in right on cue. Hey, Abby, how's it going?
Very well, thank you. Yeah,
Sorry, I just want to go back to some of those questions that were for you, Abby, because I was like, there were quite a few. So I know you've just come back on. Like, here you go. Answer questions again.
That's perfect, Marty.
But in the meantime, for the sake of time, please let us know which your favourite was of tonight. I would be really interested tonight because three kind of really interesting drams. It'd be great to know which was your favourite. Christine,
very delicious, different styles as well.
That's exactly it, but all on the same island. So that's what's really interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
So Mike Wally was asking, is the absence of peat an ecological decision?
So not from our side, because obviously we make Optimore, which is kind of the polar opposite of that. The difference for that would be so originally when Bruichladdich opened in 1881 until we closed in 94, we were very low ppm but not zero. And obviously, I think it was between 2 to 5 ppm or something. And obviously, when you distill, you lose about a third of your ppm, and then once you mature, you lose like a percentage every year. And so, just to sort of clarify the lines, to make Bruichladdich was completely unpeated, Port Charlotte heavily peated, and Optimore, the Royals, was heavily peated. Essentially, it was zero anyway. So just to sort of clarify that, in terms of like brands inside the distillery.
Sure. Steve Coleman Williams has asked, how have you made it so heavily peated, yet the taste is smoother than that of, say, Laphroaig? It's like coming down the other side of a distribution curve or some such.
So, yeah, that's a really good question. Obviously, there's loads of different reasons why whiskey tastes the way it does. I would say first and foremost, for Optimore, it would probably be the distillation style. So at Bruichladdich, we were purpose-built in 1881 to make this very specific style of whiskey. So we have very, very, very long, slim stills, and we distill unbelievably slowly. So we're getting huge amounts of reflux inside the still and huge amounts of copper contact. So we're getting basically as chatting is the chemical reaction, but basically we're drawing out as much impurity as possible. Also, at the moment, like I said before, we malt in Inverness-shire in Baird's maltings, and Inverness-shire has different peat content to what they have on Islay. So Inverness-shire will be looking more into things like woodland vegetation rather than sea vegetation. This is another thing that we're really looking into, because actually we thought that this was sort of cut and shut answers, but then we started talking to one of our botanical scientists who found the botanicals for the Botanist, and he said, well, actually, it shouldn't make that much of a difference. So that's another whole thing that we've got to look into. Now we're building a maltings on site, which is Saladin boxing. We are going to potentially be using Isla peat, so it's another interesting thing. Will that change the style of the peated malt? What difference will it make? Which is just more exciting stuff. But yeah, so the maltings for Optimore takes a good few days longer than our other expressions. Another thing that actually might make it a bit. The point of Optimore is not to make it crazy. It's to incorporate these numbers and these phenols into our distillery style. So it's got the same cut times as the other expressions. We could lengthen the middle cut of Optimore and make it crazy, but that's not the point of the whiskey.
I think that's one of the things with Optimore, though, is that people buy it on the sense of this kind of, it has this reputation now of kind of like, I want to try the peatiest thing. I want to try the most smoky thing that's going to blow my mind. And Optimore's always the thing that comes up, and it kind of has this reputation of kind of being that thing.
For sure. And it's quite funny. Like I would always say, like our sort of like what you were saying before was that people have this preconception of Islay, and then when you say the world's most heavily peated whiskey, people are really like, I need to have it or I'll never drink it. And actually the sort of, it kind of goes the opposite way for both those groups. You know, people that say I will never drink peated whiskey will have an Optimore and it'll be their favorite dram of the tasting, where if you're trying through the whole range and vice versa. So yeah, it's such a it's just a really interesting spirit. It's really thought provoking and it kind of it messes with people's perceptions, which is kind of what Bruichladdich great at. But definitely Optimore, like you say, people come in expecting one thing and very much whether they want it or not, get the other. It can either go one way or the other, but yeah.
I genuinely think, apart from in general Optimal, but I think Port Charlotte 10, just the standard 10, has got, in my opinion, is one of the best value 10-year-old whiskies from Islay, smoky whiskies. I always recommend it to people. It's an absolutely incredible dram, that one.
It is amazing. I'm just going to cut in because we have had
I can see all of them coming in through. Christy, you go for it. I can't even work out. Though I have to
go first. I'm not even sure where to start. There are so many. And again, I'm going to try and read as many as I can. We might not get
I'll just read out Steve Coleman Williams' comment. He said, WTF, Christy, you've not had Nando's. Are you British but at all?
I mean, I do hold a British passport and I know I'm letting the side down. I'm vegetarian. I still have not been for my halloumi, which I believe is on the menu. I will. Also, as an aside, I went to a service station in the week, the one on the M25 near the M3. They have a really fancy looking Nando's. So next time I'm in the area.
On the M4, they also have a Nando's at the welcome break. But anyway, we digress.
Anyway, we digress. So, we've got Quarter Cask, one of the all-time faves from Jonathan B. Right, let me find where we're going from. Steve Coleman Williams, the Bowmore Winter Night, lovely subtle sweetness. Reverend Kevin Williams, all 3 drams tonight, choices to make or not. Simon, Laphroaig for me, Bruichladdich a close second, may have to order both. We've got Laphroaig wins, but I always love Laphroaig, Bruichladdich closely behind. Scareth Peters, tut. Sorry, it's a cop-out. All 3 were great, but we have a bottle of any. Pesho, Bruichladdich, then Laphroaig and Bowmore. We've got another vote for Laphroaig from Ian Jambo Rain. Pat Cowling, bottles 19 and 20 purchased. I need a better paid job. Someone give that man a promotion. He needs his whiskey. We've got Malcolm Tucker, Laphroaig, Bruichladdich and Bowmore. We've got Mike Prezzera, the Laddie for me, then Bowmore. I can taste the quality of Laphroaig, but just too sweet for my taste. Rev Kev, as I may call you now, I hope that's okay. Let me know if not. He's gone for the Laphroaig in the end. Reed, easy the Bruichladdich for me. Colin, loved all 3, but the Bowmore remains a firm favourite. Chris Randall, one of the most difficult choices. All the drams are wonderful and each have the high points. So I think the Bowmore just edges it. John, love a peaty dram, but the Bruichladdich was so good it wins. Ali C, Bruichladdich by far the most interesting. Almos, thank you for introducing the sweeter side of Islay. Overall, very enjoyable. Mcallen, which I think is a good philosophy for life. All of Islay whiskey is the way to go for me. I love it. And we've got some more Nando's comments. Hard choice between Bruichladdich and Laphroaig for Bruce Edwards. And Pat, who's on my side. What's a Nando's? There we go. What a good roundup of an amazing evening and a toe dip into Islay. I'm very here for it.
Nando's and Islay.
Nando's and Islay. Abby, are you a Nando's fan?
I was actually just thinking that I've had 2 Nandos before in my life, and don't get me wrong, like I'm a lassie that likes the full spectrum of food. I actually do whiskey and crisp tasting, so I like
Whiskey and crisps.
Yeah, I started doing them in lockdown as a joke. Just not as a joke for myself, basically, because you couldn't go anywhere. You could only go to the corner shop, whatever. And usually it's like, this is the finest cheese, or this is the salmon caught by bloody Zeus, and you're like, well, I can't get that. So I started just doing corner shop crisps and pub snacks, and then it kind of took off. So yeah, now I do whiskey and crisp pairing. So,
oh my goodness, we need to have a dedicated.
What would you put the Bruichladdich? Which crisp would go with the Bruichladdich Organic 2009?
So we had tonight probably something a little bit lighter, so maybe not even a crisp, maybe like a mini cheddar of some sort. Like you get see, I'm quite a maize-based snack kind of gal, so I love crisps as well. I love everything. Basically, I just love snacks of the savory variety. So probably I would say maybe like a mini cheddar or something like that.
I love a mini cheddar.
Have you seen they do I'm gonna get deep, but they do flavor extensions of mini cheddars now. So they do Scottish ones called Strathdawn Blue, which is the blue cheese, which would go really well with them.
Who knew? Amazing. Oh my god, I need to get involved in this. Mini cheddar and whiskey pairings and different types of mini cheddars. This is so good. But I have seen the time, and I'm going to very sadly suggest we wrap this up. But thank you so much, everyone. Abby, you have been a phenomenal guest. Thank you for coming to chat with us. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, for your tasting notes. They've been incredible. Thank you, Andy, for your expert guidance throughout. And we will be back on the 19th of May at 7:30 on all your usual platforms for the rest of the Isla Extravaganza. Do enjoy the rest of the month, folks. Let us know what you're drinking on social media. We're at Pour and Sip Club. I also want to see your selfies in your hat if you haven't posted already.
How many bottles you've got at home?
Yeah, how many bottles you've got home? So many chats to continue.
What crisp do you like?
What crisp? Is that what crisp? Yeah. We need it. Any crisp pairings with whiskey?
Pickled onion monster munch, obviously.
They go with classic laddie really well.
Do they? Okay.
Good top tip there. Amazing, folks. Thank you so much, everyone. Have an amazing rest of your night. Thank you for joining us. Take care and see you
everyone.
soon. Bye.
Thank you for having me.